Good morning, friends. Devi here. I'm coming on today to talk to you about name changes from a spiritual perspective. I'm calling this session "What's in a Name," because there are a lot of people who feel that what's the point of changing a name, or it's weird that someone would change their name, or what does it even mean to change a name? It's an insult to your parents to change your name, et cetera, et cetera. Lots of ideas and opinions about name changes. But let's remember that the history of name changes is something that's gone back in time in every spiritual tradition. The Pope's birth name was not Francis, as you probably know. My birth name was not Mary Frances, much less Ma Devi. Mother Teresa's birth name was Agnes. So the Catholic Church and many other churches found that, and also in the East, found that changing the name when someone was a spiritual acolyte or religious acolyte, that means someone studying in a tradition, that it changed up the energy so that you could leave behind the parts of you that were not useful to your journey from that point forward. And generally speaking, parents give names, or they give names of, family names, and we'll just talk about first names to begin with, but they give a name that they find is important to them in their family. And then if someone goes on to become a religious person, then they would have a new name given to them, or they would select a new name. In the Catholic Church, people selected confirmation names. So a confirmation name was confirming that that person had decided and was accepted as a child of God in the sense of the sacraments, the sacraments of that church. And the person, or the child, actually in this case, a adolescent, chose that confirmation name themselves to represent the person that they wanted to emulate. So generally speaking, it was a saint, the name of a saint. So then you might have, a first name, a middle name, a confirmation name, and a last name. When you take on a vow or an ordination, the name change generally would happen through the ordaining body or the ordaining minister. So, for example, a priest or a bishop would baptize or ordain someone, and they would give the name. They would receive the name in meditation, from spirit, and give it to the person. So, for me, I was born. I think names are really interesting things. So you could just take a look at what your name is and where it came from. So I was born third to my parents, who had 7 children. My birth name on my birth certificate says Charlene. And I know that might sound funny to you. A lot of people want to know what my birth name was. So there you go. But interestingly, the first photo that was taken of me in the nursery, my mother's hand had written at the bottom of it this name, Charlene, with an extra A in there. That's what she wanted my name to be. But the nurse misspelled it. And so for some reason, my parents allowed that to stand. They didn't say, sorry, you spelled my kid's name wrong. They just allowed it. And so I was Charlene. And it was obviously I answered to that name, but it was never a name that really fit me, maybe because it was meant to be something different. But anyway, that was the way it happened for me. And then, of course, as time went by, I got married and I took the name of my husband. And so then that's a name change that everybody seems to be on board with. In other countries, people take both names, their mother and their father, or their father and their spouse, if it's a woman and a man situation. And then in today's world with last names, oftentimes people have 2 last names. For example, my name in my last marriage was Drake Duval, and then my children, 2 of my children, have that name, that double name, Drake Duval, and the other one is also has 2 names, my eldest. So the last names have transformed over time as well, but first names tend to be a little bit harder for people because there's not so much of a cultural expectation that people will change their first name, and sometimes people really get their nose out of joint, as my father did when I was given a new name. In my spiritual journey, I have had many new names. So I was a Mormon for a while, and I got a name there, Elizabeth. And then I was working with the Sikh yogis doing Kundalini yoga, and they gave me a name. That was Hari Dharamkar. And then when I was baptized in the religious order, the Christian mystical order, my baptism name was Rebecca, which happened to be my least favorite female name. And so when I got that name, I was a little disappointed. But when I looked up Rebecca in the Bible and I read what the name means, I went to my bishop and said, can I spell Rebecca the way it's spelled in the Bible? And because that feels better to me. And also, I found out that name meant earnest devotee. So that name, earnest devotee, really did suit me. It really did fit me. And if you know me, you know that that's true. I have been and am an earnest devotee. So that was my first name on the Christian mystical path. And that name did lift me up. It lifted me towards continuing as an earnest devotee to see what came of it. So when I was ordained as a deacon, I kept that name, and that felt right and good as well to me. When I became a priest, I was in the ordination, and my teacher, Mother Claire, at the time was ordaining me. And when she said, as we do in ordinations, and your name shall be, and she put her hand on my head, and I felt the Spirit move down from the heavens through her hand and into my being as she said, Mary Frances. And it felt like a gift from God. And that is the energetic and spiritual aspect of changing a name, is because now I am Mary Frances, the priest of God, not Rebecca the deacon or Charlene the human. And so people who are living in the mind of the world, they can sometimes be upset by that. They don't understand it. They think it's silly. They think, well, how many names are you going to have? Or they say, that's disrespectful to your parents. I had several family members who refused to call me Mary Frances, even though I changed my name legally to Mary Frances. They still had a hard time with it. And eventually I said to one particular family member, do you love me? And that person said yes. And I said, well, if you love me, just call me Mary Frances, because it's the name God gave me and I love it. You know, it's no slight to the family. It's the name God gave me. So, of course, for me, Mary Frances is very important. You can see the picture of Mother Mary over my shoulder here. There's also Mary Magdalene. There's also St. Francis. My name happens to be spelled with an I-S, which is the way that St. Francis's name was spelled. So both of those are very important to me, very dear to my heart, very much felt like me. Me as someone who was reaching toward the humility, the dedication, the service of Mother Mary and St. Francis. So for me, those were like really big spiritual shoes to fill. And I loved the name as I got it. I loved it for my priesthood. And it became my legal name. And it took people maybe, that was in 2005 when I changed my name. It took people probably a decade. And sometimes people still use my birth name, people who knew me from childhood or knew me earlier in my life. And I don't mind it. It doesn't offend me. It's just kind of funny that they are still thinking of me in that way, because certainly if you've known me over time, I've changed quite a lot since then. Finally, as I became a bishop, I got a new name. Now, I don't use that name. I love the name. The name is Liya, L-I-Y-A, and it means with God, which to me as a bishop feels much more like me than Mary Frances does. So even though I respond when people call me Mary Frances in the world, Liya is the name that God gave me, sent to me personally. It wasn't given to me outside of me, but it arose in me that this was my name as a bishop, Liya. And so it means with God. And if you know anything about the spiritual esoteric traditions, being with God means union with God. And that is my experience of my state of consciousness and my state of service. And with God in serving the world and serving love and helping to raise consciousness. That's true about me, let's say. And then I was also given this name, Ma Devi, as not so much in the role of a bishop. A bishop is someone who teaches priests and ordains priests, or in the role of archbishop, which is the role I have now, which is someone who teaches bishops and ordains bishops. But in the role of energetically on the planet to represent the Divine Mother, which is what Ma Devi means. And having these energetic names that have a meaning to them, that draw your spirit up toward God, draw your spirit up toward union, toward higher truths, higher spiritual truths, than what the average person is living is something that you may not understand if you haven't had that experience. But if you've had an experience of changing your name because of a marriage, you might understand how that shifts something in you. A name is very personal. It has a personal vibration. It means something. Um, and Shakespeare said, "A rose by any other name would smell as sweet," and that might be true. It might smell as sweet, but it's not the same. The name, when we use a word, a name, it has a certain energy, it has a certain vibration. Every word we say has a certain vibration. So if your name is William and someone calls you Billy and that doesn't suit you, you'd be like, that doesn't feel like me, that doesn't suit me, please don't call me that. So now in my life, some people call me Ma Devi. Um, my kids still call me Mom. Um, Most people call me Mary Frances because that's legally my name and the name that they've known me for some time. A very few people call me Leah. Those are generally the bishops or people who are in my close-in circle who know what that means to me and for me. Um, and very, very few people call me by my birth name. So most of the kerfuffle, let's say, about name changing has to do with people's ideas about family versus humanity. So a family unit, someone has a national pride, they might have a family pride. That family pride can be very closed and only say that I care about me and my own versus when you become a minister, your family of concern or your circle of concern grows to include all of humankind. So then the family name doesn't really suit that purpose. And also the people in the family need to let go of thinking of you. The people at that time in your life need to let go of thinking of you as that person, because it minimizes the expression of your being, of your spirit. We're meant to grow and change on the earth. We're not meant to, consume and watch TV and pay taxes and work and sleep, and maybe have a little fun on the side. We're meant to be evolving, means expanding our sense of self, expanding our sense of ourselves as spiritual beings in the material world, and how to live as spiritual beings in the material world, which means aligning ourselves with higher vibrations, higher purposes, higher values that are inclusive. They include all peoples, regardless of their differentiating factors, and also including all people, regardless of how they want to express themselves or how they want to identify themselves. So I identify now more with Leah or Ma Devi than I do with Mary Frances, but going through another name change, which might happen at some point, we'll see, would be one of those things that causes another kerfuffle that I, just not interested in at the moment. But you should know that if you've had a name change and people are diminishing it, you don't have to defend yourself. You can point to history and say, you know what, people throughout time have changed their name. It's not that big of a deal. And then maybe they can let go of that. And then if they are disrespectful, let's say, of the name, for whatever reason, someone might do such a thing, then you can just recognize that they don't understand it. And in the world, people do these kinds of emotional power plays to try to diminish something they don't understand, because they might feel something there, but if they don't understand it, they might want to dismiss it so that they can feel like they feel better about themselves in some way, I guess. I guess that's it. It's a very tender thing to receive a name from God. It's a very tender thing to be called to rise up in your own self, to rise up in love, to rise up in service. And so people of the world don't generally understand that unless they are someone who has also been called to such things. And I'm not diminishing service to family or service to country or service to community. Those are all really important things. But there's a call that some people have to the service of God, the service of love, the service of all of humankind, the service of justice, the service of peace. People are called to raise consciousness in different ways, for not just for their own sake, but for the sake of the alleviation of suffering of people who suffer from those maybe narrower ways of understanding themselves and the people around them. So that is what's in a name. It's a lot. It means a lot to the person who receives it. It would be really great if people respected that, but sometimes they don't. I had one person say to me once, I want to call you whatever you want me to call you. And I'm like, that's a lovely response, lovely, neutral and supportive response. Um, so if you have had a name change, if you were baptized and got a name change, or you've been ordained and have a name change, we say that in the baptism, you don't need to use your name change in the world because it's very tender and new to you. And we don't want to give people in the world a chance to bat at it with their opinions, because those aren't really part of the formula, are they, for having a relationship with God, people's opinions. And especially in today's world where there's a lot of anti-religious opinions, maybe not so much anti-spiritual, but when you when I say I'm a bishop or an archbishop, people sometimes have big reactions to such things and don't know what to do with that, and so they say things that are diminishing or unkind because they don't know what else to do. So anyway, we want to, as Jesus would say, forgive them, they don't know what they're doing, and also have compassion that they can't understand things that they don't know about. So they don't know about the call of the soul to God that you have maybe had if you have been through an experience where you received a new name. So I feel so blessed to have had so many lifetimes in this one lifetime. Every one of my name changes, including my marriages and divorces, those name changes taught me something valuable about who I am, where I'm going, how my life is unfolding, and what it means to be this human, this spirit having a human experience in this body. Sometimes as we grow and change, other people have a hard time. They like to put us in a container, in a box, and, well, you used to be the friend that I did this or that with. And we know in life that we have friends for a reason, sometimes friends for a season of life, and sometimes we have those friends who stick around for our whole life and watch us grow and celebrate with us as we grow and want to call us what we want to be called and stay in a loving and respectful relationship with us. And those are the folks that you carry along with you as you go along. It's tender in the heart, though, when we have a new name and someone diminishes it in some way, disrespects it in some way. It's tender because it's a gift from God, and it's very vulnerable and beautiful thing. And there are lots of people who might not understand what that's about. So if you know someone who has received a new name or changed their name for whatever reason they chose to, I hope that you will respect that and choose to call them what they want to be called. And of course, that goes for things like pronouns, which a lot of people in the world are expressing their desire to be called a certain pronoun. And that is a form of name as well. And it's hard to understand if you've not had the experience that some people have had in not wanting to be put into a category of gender. But similarly, with religious and spiritual names, it's about breaking free from a category or a box that no longer fits us spiritually, no longer suits us spiritually, no longer reflects how we see ourselves. And so we receive the name change, and if we go public with it, which is, by the way, an act of bravery, just as it is if you go public with a gender pronoun change, it puts people in a vulnerable situation. So I hope that you'll be kind to yourself and cherish your name if you have one. Find out what it means, see how it feels, how it holds you to a higher call for yourself. And if you know someone else who's changed their name or their pronoun, that you would be respectful about that too. Nobody needs to understand that change except the person that's going through it. And our job as humans sharing the planet is to respect other people's choices. Let them be who they say they are. And if that changes, so be it. Doesn't mean anything about them. I'm a psychologist. It doesn't mean that their psyche or their personality is not intact. It's just a form of growth. So we can be gentle with each other in the growth. And when you get to a certain age, you recognize that life has changed and there's no sense having big opinions about so many things. We can just let people be and be interested in what's changed for them. And when we do that, we might also recognize that each of us is changing, and we might want to have that freedom to change in ourselves as well as time goes by. So I hope that's helped you understand the name change from the spiritual context. I know you understand that more from a cultural context, and then, of course, in today's world where people are fighting for the freedom to identify themselves as they wish, as they see themselves. I hope that that softens your heart towards all of those ways of transforming that people express through this phenomena of names. Be well.